Good afternoon. If you haven't had enough being Cooperized as of yet, you get one more shot at it this afternoon. I appreciate Alan and my dad's lessons this morning. This afternoon, we're going to talk about something that it came up recently in one of Jeff's lessons where we've been talking about on Genesis. This lesson, I'm calling it On the Right Side of the Law. So we were talking about recently in one of Jeff's lessons here in chapter 3 about Adam and Eve and when sin became part of the world. And I had raised my hand and I had a thought about that as I was sitting there that morning. And after a few moments, I began to think, I'm not sure I know what the heck I'm talking about. And sometimes that happens to a person that you think, maybe there's more to this than meets the eye at first glance. I think I'm going to study on this a little bit more. So that brings us to where we're at today is I felt like, okay, I'm going to take a chance to study this. And, there is a lot more to the sin of Adam and Eve, then I think sometimes we give credit to that. So sin was introduced into the world. We know this story very well, but it starts in Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. And let's take a look at that. If you have a Bible or something with you today that you can open up, you probably want to follow along as we study about this. It says, Genesis 3, verse 1, Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree in the garden? Now, this was the first part of Satan working his way into the life of Eve, that he starts out with a question that it's not that, I wonder what the answer is to this. Satan was not sitting here thinking to himself, I wonder if God didn't plan for any way for these two people to eat. And God probably said, I bet they can't eat of everything in this garden. There's nothing here they can eat. Well, why would he say something like that? Well, I think that was, just like the Bible said, the serpent was very cunning. And this was his way of building a trust and a rapport between the serpent and Eve. And it's kind of like, I'm going to ask a question to this person, and I know they know the answer. That's going to kind of make them let down their guard and feel like, oh, hey, I know the answer to that question. I can tell you what you want to know here to that, sir. And Satan begins to build up a trust with Eve there as they just start a casual conversation about something. Well, that's the way that started. Well, Eve gives a reply to that, and Eve says in verse 2, And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. So she knew the right answers to say. She was able to say, No, wait, you're mistaken about that. We can eat of all of these trees and anything we want here, except it's just this one that we can't eat of over here. So that sets up Satan, what I would consider Satan's next big move. Now, he is very cunning. And this was all part of the plan. So it sets up, then he says in verse 4, Then the serpent said to the woman, You shall not surely die. Well, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Well, she said, "Oh wait, God has told us we can eat of this one. No, we can't eat of that one." She's saying, "There's this one tree in the midst of the garden. God said that we cannot eat it, we cannot touch it, lest we die." Now Satan, he's setting the stage to say, "Oh yeah, that tree. Yeah, you told me about all those other trees. Well, let me tell you about this one. Now I do know about that one that you're talking about. That's the one. God's kind of tricking you a little bit with that. That's what he's setting the stage for here. Now, you're not going to surely just fall over dead. If you go touch that thing, you're not, oh, you're instantly, no, you won't be dead. You can eat of that one, but God doesn't want you to eat and touch that one because he knows that the day that you do, you're going to be like God. You're going to know good and evil. Now, you know, that's the part that I think all of my life, that has thrown me a curve. That statement that Satan said. I took that for a truth, or maybe a half-truth, that Satan was feeding her a half of a truth. But you know, in studying this in a little more detail, well, that was just a bold-faced lie. That statement by Satan right there wasn't any truth in that. So, were Adam and Eve going to die if they touched and they ate of that? They certainly were. Now, maybe it was not in the time frame of what they were expecting, but because of touching it, what God said was the truth. You will die if you eat of this and you touch it. Now, another thing that I didn't really quite clearly see of what Satan said in that is that for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. You know, that's not true 100% either. Satan has tainted that and slanted that in such a way that that's not really the truth about what's going on here either. You know, Eve, she already knew right and wrong. Adam and Eve, I think, both had a full understanding of what is right and what is wrong, and she told Satan what was right and what was wrong. There was only one. There was only one right and wrong. God had already spelled it out. There's this one tree right here that you are not to touch and you are not to eat of it, or you will surely die. Now, that was the only law that there was. There were no other laws. And Eve clearly knew what that was because when she was asked, she spouted it right out. Well, right here it is. So, what Satan is saying, well, for the truth of what Adam and Eve were living under, that was not really true. She didn't need anything else. Now, Satan, he was very cunning. So, he did talk them into taking of that, and they ate. So, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasing to the eye, the tree desirable to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. Okay, so Satan wasn't completely just lying to them. There was some truth in what he was trying to tell them. But it wasn't a truth that Adam and Eve, if they had never heard from Satan, if you eat of this tree, then your eyes will be open. If they had not ever heard of that, all the truth and knowledge about right and wrong that they ever needed to know, they already had it. They didn't need anything else. So, by eating of that tree, their eyes were opened and they gained a new knowledge. Well, what was it? What was the new knowledge that they got? What did they see when they ate of this tree? Well, I'll tell you one thing they saw right there in verse 7. Man, we're naked. Something's not right here. Yeah, I think it's one of those things like some of you probably heard that old song out here at the street. Ethel, put your clothes on. You know, they knew something was up, and this was, they instantly had a knowledge here that said, I see a problem. Now, was this a sin that they saw? No, it was not a sin that they saw, because God, He hadn't told them that we know of up to this point. We haven't seen that God had told them anything about that. So, the way that I think that they came to know that this was a sin is the knowledge that they gained in one way is now that sin has entered into the world, the knowledge of what you gained is because of sin, you get some more laws. That's what you gained by sin. It's more rules, more regulation, more laws because we have sin. Well, one of the things that they got, I believe, through that is what we would consider maybe moral law. It's a moral understanding of laws that it's not necessarily something that is always a spoken thing. But it's sometimes what we might consider when you're about to do something and something in the back of your mind, something in the pit of your stomach just kind of says to you, something about this just does not feel right. I just don't feel like I'm doing the right thing here. Well, we can see that kind of plays out. In verse 8 it says, "And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord among the trees of the garden. Then the Lord God called to Adam and said to him, 'Where are you?' So he said, 'I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself.' And he said, 'Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded that you should not eat?'" So there's two things that God asked a question of right here. God says, there's only two ways that you could know that you're not wearing clothes and that you're naked. I didn't tell you that. God said, I didn't tell you that. So who told you that you were naked? Or did you eat of the tree that I told you shouldn't eat of? So God apparently knew that if you eat of that tree, it's going to give you that kind of knowledge. Or somebody might have told you. Well, Satan didn't tell them. They fessed up. Yeah, we ate of the tree. That's how we got that knowledge. Is we ate of the tree, and that's what gave us this knowledge. So that's one kind of a moral law that I think that they gained by eating of that tree. Is it obviously gave them a knowledge that there was something morally off about not wearing clothes like that. And one of the first things that they did is they started to try to make clothes for themselves because they realized that wasn't natural. It wasn't just a normal thing to be out in public like that. So later on we do realize not only that, God made clothes for them. So another kind of thing that I think that they got out of that is they probably got an understanding of what I would consider natural law. Now, a lot of times when we think of natural laws, we think of things like gravity. We think about things like, when something is in motion, it has a tendency to stay in motion. Well, this is not what I would consider a natural type of a law that they would have gotten. I don't think that they got that, hey, man, there's gravity here all of a sudden. I don't think that was the kind of knowledge that they gained. But there is kind of a natural law that we, as people, do seem to have that a lot of times will alert us when something is wrong, when we're doing something wrong, and when something maybe is even dangerous or we shouldn't do it. Like, I could almost guarantee you that even the youngest person here, that no matter what I said, if I said, you know what, I'm going to take you up to the peak of this roof right here. I want you to go right to the peak of the roof and just jump right off. It's fine. It's fine. Now, I'm play like Satan. You shall not surely die if you do this. You'll be fine. Well, Adam and Eve, that didn't seem to kick in for them. That they had a natural feeling that says, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just not believing it. I'm not doing it. In spite of what you say, I'd almost guarantee you, even some of the smallest children here, I'd have trouble even trying to get them on the roof for starters. Much less convincing them you should just jump right on off. You're going to be fine. So there are natural laws like that are almost things that we would consider there's a common sense outcome that you should have known about doing what you were doing. Now, we see in our own lives sometimes, and people around us, we see a lot of times natural laws don't always kick in for everybody. Sometimes they do get ignored. But one of the natural laws that I feel like it should have been in place, and you can see it showing itself later on as Adam and Eve began to have children. So I have a feeling that probably as Adam and Eve, they began to have children, one of the natural laws that I think should have come into place was with Cain and Abel. Now, here you've got the first Adam's family, so to speak. You've got Mr. and Mrs. Adams sitting here. You've got their children sitting here. I doubt that God rallied all of them together and said, all right, guys, sit down here. I want to have a talk with you guys. Don't kill each other, okay? Don't kill each other. That's one of the laws. I just want to be sure you guys understand. Don't go around murdering each other. At some point, I feel like that was an understood thing, that common sense, natural law, it should have taken over and said, you know what, maybe it's probably not a good thing to go around killing somebody. Well, we can see in chapter 4 of Genesis, in verse 8, it says, now Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? He said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Now, Cain, he did know enough right there that he didn't just fess up and say, oh, yeah, that guy, yeah, he's laying over there in the field. I beat the snot out of him because he was really aggravating me to no end, and I'd had enough of him. And we put an end to that real quick. Well, he knew to say, maybe I ought to defer that in some other way here and not just blatantly blurt out, yeah, I killed him. So there was some type of a natural instinct that when questioned about it, that Cain did have enough knowledge at this point that, he tried to not just lie, but not just answer the question either. Unfortunately, when dealing with God, that was something that it wasn't already known. The answer was already known. So I think those are some of the type of things that by eating of the fruit that we gained. We definitely gained a knowledge about right and wrong. But what Satan left out is we already had a knowledge of right and wrong. We didn't need the knowledge of good and evil. That's what we gained, was a knowledge of good and evil. We already had an understanding of what was right and wrong. Now, with those things, the knowledge of good and evil, it also addresses that now that we had sinned, more laws came into play for us. More rules came into play. And that was part of what Adam and Eve gained. Now, a lot of times people like to say that, yeah, that's why we all have inherited sin. That we are all born with this sin is because of what Adam and Eve did. No, we're not born with sin, but we did inherit the consequences of sin. So, just like Adam and Eve, we have the choices that Adam and Eve had. We have the ability to know what's right and wrong. We also, because of the consequences of sin, have an understanding of good and evil. Now, it's based off of that information that we also have the law. The law has been given to us. We get to make a choice just like them. Will we remain innocent and guilt-free of the law? Or will we transgress against the law and become sinners? Well, I hate to say it, Adam and Eve, they were given a test, and they miserably failed. I hate to say it, every one of us have miserably failed our test at some point too. We were given the same kind of a test somewhere along the way, and we didn't stack up any better than Adam and Eve did when they were being tested at their time. Now, we might have even had an advantage over Adam and Eve. We do have the knowledge of good and evil, as well as we have the law. In some ways, maybe the law is a little more difficult. They didn't have but one. We got a lot more after that. And one way that shows is once sin was introduced into the world, it began to spread pretty rapidly among people. Sin spread so rapidly that by the time that we got to Leviticus chapter 18, what originally was not a sin at all, which was to be naked, it got an entire chapter wrote about just that. The do's, the don'ts, the don't do this, don't do that. It's all pertained to sexual immorality and nakedness. A lot of laws and rules came because sin began to run rampant with that. Now, there's probably never been a better liar than Satan. He still is doing the same thing to us today that he was doing then. He's got a lot more tools in his arsenal to use against us than ever. The good news to that is unlike what they had at that time, we have something that they did not have. That's a way back, an easy way back from sin. Repenting of sin, it wasn't as easy to do in Adam and Eve's time, and it was starting to be worked out as to how that was going to take place for man to make his way back from the sins that we had committed. But you know, in Noah's day, sin reached a pretty bad point. It reached a level that it was so bad that God destroyed all mankind because of it, short of one family, and decided to rebuild again from one family. Now, since then, we've gotten a great advocate that's come available for sin. So when we fall short, when we do just as Adam and Eve and we fall short of sin, we have a hope that we can return back to being in a glorious relationship with God that can be just as great as being in the garden, I imagine. You can have that type of a relationship that you could talk and pray to God. You can understand God's will. We can see that in 1 John chapter 3. 1 John chapter 3, starting in verse 4, it says, "Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. And you know that he was manifest to take away our sins, and in him there is no sin. Whoever abides in him does not sin. Whoever sins has neither seen him nor knows him. Little children, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteousness, just as he is righteous. He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifest, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whoever has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he has been born of God." Christ was manifested because Satan was super cunning, super tricky, and sin was brought into the world, the knowledge of good and evil. Now, it wasn't that God didn't realize that was going to happen. It wasn't that God was naive in the understanding of the man that he created. But there was a plan put in place for that we have the ability to take advantage of that plan in our lives now. And that is that the blood of our Lord and Savior, it can wash away sins. It can abolish sin. It can take them and obliterate sin. And so long as a person chooses that and allows themselves to come into contact with that blood, the Bible says you can be washed as white as snow again. That's a wonderful place to find yourself. Now, I'm sure in Adam and Eve's day and people before Christ came along, if they would have only known how wonderful that it could have been, or that it was going to be. But that's something that in our time, we still have some things that we have to do to come into contact with that. We still have to be willing to start at the bare bones principles of the gospel. And we have to pick up at that point and say, you know what? I've been hearing about this guy. I've been hearing about this guy, Jesus Christ. And it makes sense to me. This makes sense. It makes a lot more sense than a lot of the other things that you're trying to hear out here. If you want something that you can really believe in, boy, this makes sense. And based on that, based on what I heard and I've read and I now believe, it makes sense that I'm going to repent of those things that I did. It seems to be that I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be something else, something better than I was. And I'm going to repent of the things that I had done. And I am going to do what those people wouldn't do. I am going to confess that I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And based upon that confession, I can then come in contact with the blood of Christ through the watery grave of baptism. Now, that's available to every single living person on the face of the planet today. But you know what? It's like a guy told me one time. He said, "You see this cemetery down the road right here? There's nobody alive today that's allowed to be buried in that cemetery down the road. Nobody is. But once you get in there, there's nobody in there. If you haven't been in this one, it's too late." Now, you get a chance to be in a watery grave, and there will come a chance that we all have a chance to be in a physical grave. But if you haven't made it to this one first, the next one, it is scary. But if you make it to this one before that one, there's hope. There's a hope that's unbelievable. Now, many of us that are here, I'm sure, have already taken advantage of that opportunity. But it is a difficult world that we live in, and it is got a lot of challenges in it. Sometimes those challenges cause us to stray. If that's something that's happened privately in our lives, we can handle it privately in our lives. If it's something that's happened publicly in our lives, there's a way to handle it publicly in our lives as well. If there's anything that we can do in either one of those for anyone that may be here this afternoon, we would welcome you to come. We can handle that easily for you as we stand and sing this song this afternoon. Let's stand and sing.